Hello and welcome to a quick introduction to the EA import module for OpenERP. This module lets you import CSV data into OpenERP. It's a flexible and yet powerful tool to do this job. Our company is called Enapps. We are based in London in the UK. We've done a number of other modules for OpenERP like Account Voucher and Account FSTR, but this tutorial will just be reviewing the import module which we are launching today. So it's an expert level module, so I'm expecting anybody who is viewing this video to know already how to install a module and get it into the system. First off, if you don't have the module, you can pick it up on the Apps website, apps.openerp.com, or you can get it from Launchpad. Also in the blog that's going up on our website you will have links to both of these places to get it, and also a link to this video. So here's an OpenERP database, and I've installed the module, and you find it in settings in a folder called Import Tool. So the module consists of two places where we can work. We can configure templates, and we configure something called an import chain. So let me just show you one of the imports in action here. You'll notice that I have just one customer, which is called Order Import. Now I've configured some things in the system already, which I will go through in the tutorial, but we'll have a look at a very simple import that imports partners. So in OpenERP, a partner, which is a customer or supplier, is represented in the database in two tables. One of them is called res.partner, and the other one is called res.partner.address. So we'll just have a look at our CSV file here. Hopefully the screen refresh is not causing any trouble on YouTube. But you'll see the CSV file here contains the name, address 1, address 2, address 3, city, country, contact name, and email address as an example. So of course you can import this sort of data with the standard OpenERP tool, but this is a nice example to show how we can set up relations in the EA import module. So in this case, for each customer, each one has a number of contacts and addresses that we want to import into the database. So this is just an example of the data, so you can have a look. Now what we'll do is just show you importing the data directly here and what happens. So we'll get into configuring the templates in a minute, but I would simply name my template, select the CSV file that I want to import. I can choose which separator the CSV file may have for the data. There also could be a delimiter, single or double quotes. Now clicking on the import data button takes the data from the file that's been loaded and imports it into the system. So I've just clicked on that, and the result comes up down here showing that the res.partner model and the res.partner address model have both received an import. So I will click quickly on the show result button, and that brings up a tab with the resulting imported data. So I have here three customers that have been created: Bill's Computers, Bob Motors, and Frank's Hardware. And if I go into Bill's Computers for a second, I can see that there's been 4 contacts created in this customer record. So just bringing up the CSV again, I'll show you that down here, Bill's Computers, the 4 lines represent the 4 contact addresses, but it only created a single customer record based on how I define my template. So let's define this template from scratch now, and we'll have another look at how to do the import. So if I'm going to use a tool, the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to create some templates. So this is sort of the brains of the actual import. So we'll call this one test partner import, and I'll end the description with res.partner just so we can be a little bit more clear. Now use of this module is going to require knowledge of the OpenERP database, the tables and objects and whatnot in there. So it's sort of an expert level tool, although it's not too difficult to learn this if you're studying OpenERP on your own. So I'm going to import partner data, and I'll explain to you what these fields are. The header is just saying whether we have a header in our CSV file or not. If we tick this box, it will ignore the header. The header is not actually processed. So this CSV has a header, so I need to tick it. These next two tick boxes are options for when you want to import your CSV, whether you want the import to be just updating data records or also creating data records. So if we have them both ticked, then it will do both. If it finds a record that already exists in the database based on the key we have defined, it will just update it with the latest information. Otherwise, it will create one. So you could have just the create new, and all it would do would create new records and not care about the key, or the update existing, where it will search on a particular key. Just to demo what's happening there, we'll quickly flip back to the import chain, and we'll notice that if we import the data again, you see a new list of import results, which I'll display. But if I check in my database the sales address book customers, I'll notice that there's only still 3 records there. It hasn't created all sorts of duplication of data. It is understood, based on the way things have been configured, that it is going to update the existing data only, as well as create anything that does not exist. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the configuration, we have here the template lines. Now a template line is set up like so. The sequence field refers to the column in the CSV file. Sometimes the sequence is ignored if it's a particular type of field, but in most cases it represents the column in the CSV file. So for the res partner table, all we're going to really need is the name of that particular company, and it happens that it's in the first column, number 1, so the sequence here will remain 1. What we do in the field name is we link to the field within this table, res partner, to the field that we want to map this data to. So of course we want to map it to the name, so just do a quick sort there, and the name field is down here. So I've selected that, and we have a few other options which I will be running throughout the presentation, but for each of the template lines we have a number of different things we can tick and configure. A default value would be, if there is nothing in that particular cell in the CSV, it would populate that with a default value. You can also set the import to use only default values for this particular field name. So we'll see that in a different example with the sales orders, but once you tick that box, it takes away the sequence, which becomes irrelevant. It will just populate a default value. This is useful for if a particular field is a required field in the OpenERP database, but your CSV file doesn't have any data that represents that. So for example, when you're uploading a sales order requires a price list, where you may not have a price list in your CSV, so you could just define the price list that is going to be used directly here. So in this example we don't have a default value, we don't mind about that. This required for creating new just means that if a row in the CSV file does not have this particular piece of data, it will not create that record. So you have quite a bit of control and flexibility here. In our spreadsheet, all the cells are filled, so it doesn't really matter. And finally, this is a very important field, the key field for updating. What this tick box represents is the key that the import will use for writing, creating, or updating the database. So in this example, obviously, we only want one customer record for every customer name that we see in the spreadsheet. So we don't want 3 Bob's Motors, 4 Frank's Hardware, 4 Bill's Computers. We only want one record. So the key field for updating here will check each line as it's importing and say, okay, does this name already exist in the database? If it doesn't, then it will create one. If it does, then it will not create that particular record. So the import for this particular table will create Bob's Motors, the first one, and then it will skip over these next two, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that it completely misses the next data in these columns, in these rows 3, 4, 5, etc. It's just for this particular object, res partner, it would. And you will see how the contact relationship gets set up in the next template. So, because a customer, I'll flip to the customer quickly here, only has a name at the top. You could have a reference, you could have other things in your CSV, but this is the only sort of relevant field. This is all we need to configure for this particular template, so I'll save that. And I will create a new